Star Wars lab exercise that hopefully we'll get to before lunch to get some practice with this stuff. So I pasted the README into Slack. Let's talk about our objectives here. So what we want to cover is we want to have a good sense of the DOM, or the document object model, be able to open and describe the components of the Chrome DevTools, which you guys should be pretty savvy on the DevTools by now. We've been using them over the past few days. So we're just going to kick the tires one more time with the DevTools. Be able to use the DevTools to manipulate web pages, HTML, CSS, and such. And then we'll get to start to learn how to debug our code. So the console tab in Chrome, as you guys probably already know, is a great place to send yourself error messages. Chrome and your scripts are very good, particularly with JavaScript, about letting you know if something's blowing up. And you can check your console for those error messages, and usually it'll help you pinpoint an issue. So it's really user-friendly in that respect. So to get started, I wanted to ask you guys a question. And if someone wants to come on mic and help us out, I wanted to just offer up the floor and ask, can someone in their own words describe the difference between HTML and the DOM? How are those two things related? How are they different? Does someone want to try to explain that in their own words as we get started this morning? Don't be shy now.
Is HTML more like the content, and then like the DOM is more like the objects?
Yeah, that's a really good description. Does anyone want to add on top of that? Add to that? So the DOM is definitely an object. So I'm going to put a couple of little examples into Slack. So this is what we're going to be doing this morning and today, is trying to differentiate the difference between HTML and the DOM. So one example that I like to think of is, I think of the HTML, not only the HTML, but our JavaScript, our CSS. I like to think of those as the recipe or the ingredients. The browser grabs those ingredients, and the browser is kind of like a big fancy oven. And the browser takes those ingredients, takes the recipe, the instructions via HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it bakes our web page. So it bakes the dish, if you will. So HTML you can think of as the scaffolding of our web pages. The DOM, or the document object model, is the browser's interpretation of the HTML. So we're going to go into Chrome and we're going to manipulate the DOM, but we're going to see that we're not actually manipulating the HTML itself. We're actually manipulating the browser's version of the HTML, the dish that it bakes, essentially. So to get started, I like to show the students this app. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, and I hope you guys don't spend the entire morning playing with this because it's a lot of fun. But to sort of differentiate the difference between HTML and the DOM, go ahead and click on that link that I put into Slack. This is a fun little app called Kick-Ass App. Has anyone heard of this or visited this app before? So I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk through this. Kind of a quick demo of the difference between HTML and the DOM. This is a lot of fun. So I'm going to share my screen now. So if you click on that link, this is a cool little kind of a bookmarklet type app that two brothers built, if you scroll down to the bottom. And it's pretty fun. The way this works is this big launch kick-ass button. I want you guys to kind of select that and drag it up to your bookmarks bar up here. And you should see a little bookmark called Kick-Ass. So what you can do now is you can go to any website and you can essentially kind of blow up the browser's version of any given site. So I'm going to go to CNN.com, for example. So you guys can go to CNN or some other site. And then you can click on the kind of bookmarklet up here, Kick-Ass. And it should take just a second because CNN's a pretty dense, a lot of stuff's going on. And you guys see where my cursor is? There's a little like white triangle / spaceship type situation going on here. So this is our kick-ass, kind of like a Space Invaders type spaceship. Now, you can hit the space bar to shoot little, digital bullets out of the little spaceship here. You can also use your up, down, left, right arrow keys to direct the spaceship. So it takes a little bit of getting used to direction-wise. But observe what this little app does. So I'm going to point up here to like the nav bar / the scene in icon. I'm going to hit the space bar. And you see how like the scene in icon disappeared? And then I can go up here to these other kind of nav selections. Ooh, I just blew up the entire nav. This little headline banner, I'm going to blow that up. Well, let me get up here. Boom, gone. Breaking news. We don't need no breaking news. See if I can direct this better. Oh, I'm not a pilot. This thing is very difficult. There we go. So we blew up some breaking news. I don't like this ad, this little Samsung ad. I'm gonna see if I can blow that thing up. Boom. Get it out of here. I can blow up these articles on the left-hand side. And then if you go into, if you inspect your element here, so if you go into the Chrome DevTools, again, using Option Command I is the shortcut, I'm going to go to my Elements tab and observe what happens as I use this kick-ass little spaceship to blow up these DOM elements. For example, I'm going to see if I can blow up this H2 headline right here. So pay attention here in the DevTools to this H2. When hopefully my aim is pretty good this morning, I'm going to maneuver my little spaceship and try to get over there. Oh man, this is hard. Okay, let me get over there. Boo, boo. All right. So boom. So I just blew up that big H2, kind of that headline tag, and then it also disappeared from down here in this section of my page. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Hopefully you guys got that working. So my question again to you is, if someone wants to come off mic, will someone explain to the class what exactly is happening with that app, with their little kick-ass spaceship? Can someone describe what's happening with that application?
Pure magic, delicious magic. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I was going to go with witchcraft, but magic works too, absolutely. So it's pretty much in line with what Jesse mentioned earlier. Does anyone want to kind of expand on what that simple, goofy little app is doing to our browser pages? Is it really blowing up CNN.com?
It's making a copy of it, I'm imagining, or something. But I blew up a bunch of stuff, and then I clicked on a link that was still there, and it was still functioning. So the things that are still there do still function.
Huh, interesting.
Black magic.
So what happens if you refresh the web page? So if I refresh CNN.com, it goes back to its original state. I get a brand new, fully baked copy of CNN.com. So what does that tell us about what that goofy little app is doing? Is it manipulating the HTML, or is it manipulating the browser's version of that HTML, i.e. the document object model or the DOM?
Is it removing individual just for the moment?
Sorry, one more time. I was talking over you.
Is it just removing individual things like temporarily so you can see certain items on the page?
Yeah, that little app, it's literally just deleting models, objects in the document object model. So what we're actually manipulating, again, it's not the HTML, but it's the document object model. It's the browser's version or the browser's interpretation of that HTML code. And we can see that because when we refresh CNN.com, our browser makes a new request to CNN.com servers, gets all of those new ingredients, all of the HTML, JavaScript, all of the ads, all of the links, the images. It gets all of those ingredients and it rebakes that dish every time we hit refresh. So what we're actually manipulating is the document object model. So we can think of the HTML as the recipe or the instructions. The browser bakes that into a dish, which we could refer to as the DOM. You can also see that if you go down into your inspect element, we'll do this here in a few minutes, but you can actually click on different sections of the page and hit delete. And you can delete those. You can delete those objects directly without the spaceship. You can do it manually if you go down into the DevTools. But I like to show that app because I think it's kind of a fun way to think about HTML versus DOM. They're very much related, but they're two entirely separate entities. So I just want to point that out. Any questions about kind of HTML versus the DOM? Cool, so let's move forward. I just pasted into Slack a graphical image, kind of an interpretation of what the DOM looks like. A DOM tree, if you will, is how we refer to the DOM sometimes. So this first bullet point, what is the DOM? Well, like we just discussed, so your browser is going to receive a page as HTML, and it's going to create a model or a version of that HTML, and it's going to store it in memory in the browser, creating a document object model. So that's what we just did. We just deleted parts of the model. We didn't actually delete the HTML. And then here's what the DOM tree looks like. So in this example, in this graphic here, we have HTML as kind of the parent tag, right? So we have our HTML, and then nested within those HTML tags, we have the head section and the body section. And then in the head section, we have things like the links, we have meta tags, maybe the title of the page, maybe our script tags, our link tags to CSS style sheets and such. Then in the body, that's kind of the main visual content. That's what we actually see rendered in the browser. And so some examples of that are H1 tags, P tags, etc. And you can see here, for example, there's a unordered list and unordered list. And then beneath that, you can see little branches for the LIs that are contained within that unordered list. So we talk about the DOM kind of like a tree structure with different nodes, different branches, and that's what we're going to manipulate today using JavaScript. A couple other bullet points pertaining to the DOM, just some things to keep in mind. So the DOM has properties, methods, and events that each browser implements in the same way. So JavaScript is pretty much a cross-browser type language. Safari has some dev tools, Firefox. In my opinion, Chrome has like the best, most full-featured set of tools, and that's why we use Chrome most of the time. But the DOM is an object, and just like any other JavaScript object, it has properties and methods that we can call on it. Each DOM element is an object, so each element in that HTML gets converted into an object that the browser can render. The DOM is inspectable using the web inspector. That's what we're going to be doing this morning. The DOM defines a hierarchy for all the content elements in the document. So that refers to that image right above these bullet points that kind of describes, it looks kind of like a tree structure. Now go into your console. Let's go back into the DevTools. I'm going to share my screen. And let's take a look, just for example, of some of the methods and properties that we have available to us on this document object model. So if you want to do an option command, you can do an option command J actually, and that'll get you directly to the console, to the JavaScript console. So the DOM is also referred to as the document. So go ahead and type document into the JavaScript console. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see it. And the great thing about the JavaScript console is that it makes it really user-friendly. So let's say that I'm trying to think of a method or a property that does something, but I can't quite remember the exact syntax for it. The great thing about the JavaScript console is that we can type the name of the object, and then we hit that period, also known as a dot operator. And in Chrome, we have a list, so we could go to W3 Schools and see the same information, or we could Google this. But Chrome is really good about showing us all of the available methods and properties on this document object. So we can just scroll down here, maybe something will like, kind of trigger our memory. But we can see all the options available to us, all of the methods, properties that we can call on this document object. We can scroll through them right here. So what I want you guys to do, just as an example, go ahead and type in document.lastModified. And again, you'll notice that if you just start typing, it'll kind of filter the different properties and methods available to you. So it makes it a little bit more user-friendly. So I'm highlighted on this last modified. So I can just click on it and it'll auto-complete it for me. So for example, document.lastModified, what is this returning right here? What is this property, last modified? What is this returning?
Well, last time the index.html file was uploaded to whatever server is hosting it.
Yeah, well, actually, this is a little more recent than that because this is 11:31 Eastern Time and 36 seconds. So this is actually recent. This is the last time that, in this case, I made some changes to the document. So I actually called document in the console. So it's actually really sensitive. It actually, recognizes that that I tried to access it in some way. So if I do this one more time, now I get a little bit more of an updated kind of version. There's also a property, it's escaping me, but you can also see a property of, it may be like last updated or something, if you want to see the last time that maybe it was uploaded or that the browser actually loaded the page in the browser. Also, while we're here, let's do a document and then let's call title, for example, just for funsies. So that's going to return kind of the title of the document. So if you look up in the tab of Chrome right up here at the top, so actually this document, since it's on GitHub, it probably doesn't have like an official, title. The title is really just kind of the link or the directory that this file lives in on GitHub. And so this title is actually, it looks like it's the same thing that's rendering at the top of the tab in Chrome. And if you hover over it, it does look, it's pretty much the same thing. But any part of the document you can call down here in the console, and this is what we're going to get into today. So we could even do document, for example, .body if we wanted. This is going to show us the body of the document. This is the same thing as if we went into the Elements tab. Let me close this right here. And we looked at the body right here. So whether we access it directly through this Inspect Elements tab, or if we go to the console tab and use JavaScript to access it, this is really the same thing. We're just digging into that DOM, or the document object model, and calling some properties and methods and such on it. So any questions about that? Document object model, maybe the difference between HTML and what the DOM represents. It's just a representation of that HTML code. All right, let's talk a little bit about DevTools, and then we'll get into some exercises. So the DevTools, I know that you guys are probably already pretty savvy on the DevTools, but they're super handy, and they give us an opportunity to be a detective. So I feel as a web developer, part of the hats, or one of the hats that we wear is that we need to be a world-class detective or a Sherlock Holmes. So either we go into the DevTools and we're experimenting with changing CSS like we did yesterday, or either we're experimenting, we're investigating why we're getting some errors, why our code is broken. So as we put on our detective hat, the DevTools is a great apparatus or a great set of features that we use to investigate our code. And that's how I like to think of the DevTools. A couple of the useful things that we can do is, as we just saw, we can investigate the HTML, the DOM, the CSS. We can go in there, we can check it out, we can manipulate it. We can also see requests to the server, so we can see the requests that our browser makes to CNN.com. We can see the response that CNN.com gives us. We're going to talk a little bit more about requests and responses starting in Unit 2 when we start building our own full stack applications. We can observe JavaScript being run in the console. We can debug issues in the DevTools in the JavaScript console. So the DevTools are super powerful. Now, for the majority of the class, we're only going to deal with 3 main tabs in the DevTools, and so that's all we're really going to touch on this morning in the interest of time. So let's play around with kind of the 3 main tabs we're going to be playing around with throughout our 13 weeks together here. So let's take a little bit of a dive into the Elements tab, the Network tab, and the Console tab. And I put some shortcuts in here. So if you want to get to the exact tab with one command, these are some of the shortcuts. So Command Option I will open up on the last tab you had open. Command Option J will put you directly into the console, JavaScript console tab. And then Command Option U is a really handy one. That actually opens the source of the page. And it opens it up in a different tab. So you can see the entire tab window is just the source or the HTML, the browser's document object model rendition of that HTML code. You can see that in a separate browser tab. And sometimes that's really helpful if you want to have some more real estate. Let me demonstrate what that looks like. So I do this frequently if I don't want to like split my screen with the dev tools on the bottom and like the browser window on the top. What I can do, for example, with GitHub here is I could do Option Command U, and that'll open up all of the kind of the source HTML code in a separate tab. So again, sometimes this is really handy. You can also see the line numbers. So it gives you a little bit more detailed information than if you were viewing this directly, let's say in the Inspect Element window tab down here at the bottom. So maybe that'll be helpful for you guys if there's a situation where you want to see it in this way. A little bit easier to read that way. Cool. So the first tab we want to play around with, again, let's play around with the Elements tab. And we're going to go to General Assembly's homepage to hack around on it like we did yesterday. So the Elements tab, we can inspect the HTML and CSS of a web page. We can test out different layouts of the page like we did yesterday. And we can also edit CSS on the fly. So we talked about it's a lot easier to go into the DevTools and experiment. You can think of it as a sandbox where we can make some changes, see what colors we like, what kind of positioning we like, before we hard code it into our Atom or Sublime text and such. So go ahead and go to generalassembly.ly, and we're going to walk through a little bit of an exercise here. I am going to do the same. So go ahead and open that up in another tab if you want. Get my instructions over here on the other side. Cool. So go ahead and open up the DevTools. So you can do that with the Command Option I. Let me shrink this down just a little bit. Cool. So as you guys probably know, when you open up the DevTools on the Inspect Elements tab, here on the left is the document object model or the browser's rendition of that HTML code. And then here on the right, these are some CSS properties. So this is our CSS sandbox. So it lays it out really nicely. We have our HTML DOM on one side and our CSS stuff on the right-hand side of the window. So what I want you guys to do to start, let's actually select the body tag, and we're going to play around with that a little bit. Now the body tag is not too crazy to find. We can just click on it down here. And yesterday Matt demonstrated, Matty B, so we can do this in Atom, right? It's really handy. We have the little, we can close different sections. And you can do that here as well. I can actually delete the entire body. If you highlight body and then hit delete, you can actually just wipe out the entire web page. So that's kind of the spirit of what that kick-ass app was doing. Now to undo that, to bring it back, I can just do a Command Z to undo, or I could have refreshed the page either way. But you can totally go in here and edit the live version of the DOM for sure. Cool, so go ahead and select the body of our page, and then go over here to the right-hand side.
Mark?
Yeah.
What does the equals $0 mean?
So that refers to if you select on different elements, it's just, it's a visual representation of the current element, the current object that you're on. I'm sure there's
ever say $1?
Do what?
Would it ever say like $1? Like I'm just wondering why the equals $0 pops up.
Yeah, I'd have to look at like, the precise semantic meaning for that. Generally,
Okay.
when I see the dollar signs and such, it's usually some sort of JavaScript going on underneath. A lot of times, for example, when you use Angular or React or some other JavaScript front-end framework, sometimes there's some more like decoration that it puts onto your code that you didn't write. But when the browser renders that code, sometimes it puts its own kind of tracking information on it. But yeah, just whatever you're clicking on, you're going to see that dollar sign. Cool. So go ahead and select the body. And again, we did a little bit of this yesterday, so you guys should be pretty savvy at this stuff. But if you select the body and you go over here to the right-hand side of the DevTools, you can see all of the CSS rules associated with the body tag. And just for funsies, just to demonstrate, I want you guys to go down here to the body background color selector right here. So see, I'm like clicking and unclicking it. So the background color is actually white. So we're not really seeing any difference when we turn it on or off by clicking it or unclicking it. But just as a demonstration of what the DevTools can do, go ahead and double click right here on the value of background color. So we have this little white square and then the pound sign and FFF. So to keep things simple, just type in the word red there and hit enter. And what that's going to do, you may need to expand the browser, but it's actually going to change the background color of this kind of right-hand panel area right here. So that's how easy it is to go in here and play around with these websites. Let's say if I wanted to play around with the font size, I could go in here and increase it, you know, maybe like 200%. Well, I don't know what that did. That wasn't very obvious. But we did that yesterday. You can go in here and play around with these. But specifically, I wanted to show you kind of the background color, because the color features in the DevTools, there's actually some pretty cool things you can do. So go ahead and get your pointer and just kind of hover over that background color. And you'll see a little kind of instruction pop up. So one of the cool features of DevTools is if you hover over this and you hold down the Shift key and you click on it, it's going to show you what that color looks like with different value codes, right? So we talked about some hex codes. If I wanted to see what it looked like in RGB, here's the code for that. If I wanted to see what it looked like in HSL, here's the code for that. So that right there is a pretty handy tool for you. You can also click on that little red box and it'll open up a nice little color palette for you. So if you're trying to dial something in, but you obviously don't know the hex code for it specifically, you can just go in here and play around, very similar to like an Adobe Photoshop type situation. And you can go in here and you can play around with the color and experiment and see if there's something that you like. So that's a fun little, just a sample of some of the tools that are available to you here in the CSS area. The other thing you can do is if you, let's say that I wanted to add some other property to this body tag. So you can kind of click down here inside the CSS rule for body, and you can just start typing a rule. And again, the DevTools are really handy, and it'll start kind of guessing the property that you want to access. So again, I can't memorize all this stuff, but if I know that I'm looking for some sort of like font size or font family, I just type in the word F, and then suddenly it starts filtering it down, you know, properties that start with F. So that's a really good example of that. It's very, very user-friendly. And these are going to save you a lot of time when you're trying to dial in different types of layouts, CSS properties on your apps. We would highly encourage you to take advantage of these DevTools because they're a super efficient way to get your work done. All right, so that brings us to a little bit of a you-do section. Yeah.
Mark, this might be a little bit obvious, and I'm going to miss this, sorry, but
Sure.
Why not just make all these changes in your editor, save it, and then refresh the page? Like, what's the trade-off? Why would it be better to be doing it on the console? Because if it works, don't we have to copy and paste it back into our editor anyway? Right.
Let me ask you this. What's more efficient? Let's say that I don't know what background color I want, or let's say that I don't know what font, you know, size or family. Is it more efficient for me to quick and dirty just come in here and change it and experiment
100%.
here? Yeah. It's just a lot more efficient.
Got it.
And actually, I think once you decide, of the rules, I think you can either copy it from here, or there's a way to export the rules. I'd have to play around with it. I usually just figure out what I want and just dump it in manually, but you can also copy the entire style sheet. You can kind of export it. Yeah, that's a good question. Cool, so I put a little bit of exercise time here in Slack. So let's take about 5 minutes. And given what we've seen with DOM manipulation and playing around with different elements, I want you guys to try to play around with these 3 bullet points. So I want you guys to experiment with this General Assembly logo up in the top left. I want you guys to hack that. I want you guys to find some other logo or some other image on the web, and I want you guys to replace that logo with that other image. And then see if you can play around with the CSS properties to make that logo fit. So the logo or the image that you choose may not fit perfectly in that nav space. So play around with some of the CSS properties here in the DevTools and see if you can make it fit a little bit. And then finally, another challenge, I want you guys to change the font family of the first H1 tag on the page to Arial and the color to red. So the first H1 tag on the page is actually, we saw this yesterday, is this pursue a career that you love. So I want you guys, again, to change the font family to Arial or something else, and then just change the font color, just to get a little bit of kicking the tires and with the DevTools and such. So let's take about 5 minutes. You guys play around with that. And let me know if you have any questions. Let's hack some GA website stuff. And remember, when you refresh the page, it's going to go back to its pristine state. So make sure if you're right in the middle of something that you don't accidentally refresh and kind of wipe everything out. I'm going to unshare my screen while we hack on that for a minute.
Images.
Yep.
I like that one. I was like, yay. And then I went view image and I grabbed it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you want to make sure that you're grabbing like the essential image and you're not grabbing like the web page that the image lives on. Do you guys know another quick and dirty shortcut if you're on a random page and you want to grab the image itself? Another really quick strategy you can do. Danny, you can keep sharing.
Okay. What do you want me to?
Yeah, so go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah.
And let's go to like, well, actually, go back to your Rihanna, the other tab, and go back. Oh, sorry, that opened up in a new tab. Go back to Rihanna album, where you're searching on the images, and just click on an image, and let's see the options that come up. Cool. Now go to visit page. So let's say that we're on some random page, not through Google Images, and let's say that we want to snag one of these images. Another really quick way to do this is you can right-click on the image. So if you're on a Mac, you want to hold down the Control key. Yeah, great. And see where it says copy image or save image as, or copy image address actually would be even better. So that's kind of a direct link to that image. So you can copy the exact URL for the image itself. And you could do it that way. That's another nice little strategy if you're in a pinch.
Oh, no. Go back. So I'll grab this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it keeps just linking me here. Having a hard time grabbing it.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little tricky. You want to make sure that that inspect element is highlighted. Good.
Okay, so then, I think it's because I'm on share. Then I just literally double click that, paste in, and booyah.
Yeah. What would be another way to change that image? Without clicking on the DOM section on the left, how would you change that image using the CSS portion on the right? How could we do that? So go ahead and refresh your page.
Sorry, I'm moving y'all. Oops, sorry. Just trying to move you out of my screen so I can grab things down here. So refresh.
And let's do this. So I wanted you guys to play around with positioning and stuff. So let's actually grab the logo, the GA logo. And I think to do that, you may want to make your browser a little larger. So oh, there you go. Yeah, right at the top. So let's actually replace that with that image. So the way that we could do that is we could go over to the right-hand side. So if you look at where Dana just clicked, so for the logo, the URL of the image isn't in the HTML. We're going to have to go to the CSS to find that. And Dana, yeah, you did it perfectly. So yeah, we want to go to that background image property. So in the CSS section, you can just paste in that Rihanna image. And make sure that you keep, so if you go back to the CSS property, it marked it out because we didn't format it correctly.
Okay.
So background image, the value is going to be URL, and then in parentheses, you put in the URL of that image. So that's the correct way to do that. There you go. And then close that out. Cool. And so you see, so that's a really big image, so we need to resize it. But
All
yeah,
right.
so hopefully you guys can see that you could do it in the HTML directly, the DOM area directly, or you can go into the CSS and adjust something like background image. So just two ways to play around with it. And then, yeah,
Is there
you
a
could play around with
way to resize an image like that to make it fit? Because I was having the same problem, and I had the problem yesterday with images too. I don't know if there's like a quick and easy fix for that.
So, so the reason that you're having, this was part of the exercise. The reason that you're having difficulty changing that image is because that image is, or the logo is actually enclosed within that nav bar. So there's probably some CSS rules that are kind of conflicting with each other. So you would either have to like shrink the image down really small, or you would have to change the nav bar sizing. And that's just something that you'd have to play around with. But that would be a way to pursue that. But I bet that the nav bar is constricting the size and the height of that that logo image. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so that would be the approach. That's awesome, Dana. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then does someone want to quickly show us if we changed the font family and the font color for that H1 tag? Would anyone want to volunteer and show us how to do that? I'm going to call on someone.
Hey, Mark, just
Yeah.
a quick question before you go.
Sure.
I'm on the console, I'm on the elements, but when I click on the page, how can I click on the page and make sure that I see below in the console what is being highlighted?
Cool. All right. Why don't you share your screen?
Mouse.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Pedro, if you want to share your screen, let's take a look at that.
Okay.
And we'll walk through kind of the changing the font family and such while we're here.
You guys see it well?
So so if you want, so again, that needle in a haystack, what you can do is go to that, yeah, perfect.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, and then click on an element and it'll point it out down there. So
Okay.
Pedro, while we have you, let's go ahead and change that font. Perfect, yeah, so click on that.
Okay.
So when you click on that element, now on the CSS side, it's going to show you all of the rules for that H1 specifically. So we can go into, let's see if we see a font family. If you scroll up a little bit.
Okay.
So you see right there in the second section that dot masthead? just for demonstration purposes, unclick that font family. Let's see if that does anything. So go into the browser and yeah, so see, even deselecting that font family property, you can see that we get, we can change the DOM, right? So go ahead and click on that again, Pedro. So there you go. So you could go in there, you could double click, and you could change the font if you wanted, but I think that's enough, just so you guys can see that, you have control to manipulate this. Let me ask you guys this question. You can put this into Slack, or if someone wants to come off mic. Oh, perfect. Yeah, and that's how we would change the color. So notice on the font family, Pedro, if you want to go back.
Yep.
So if you guys notice on the font family property that we have like 3 different fonts listed, right? I think it said News and then maybe Georgia, then Arial. Why do we list several different font families, font family selections for values on that font family property? Why would we do that? Why don't we just put, Times New Roman on there? Why did we have several different options?
It's not everybody has those fonts installed on their computer.
Yeah, Jason hit it on the head too. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, so CSS gives you the ability, if a browser won't render a particular font, you can give it some fallback fonts. Now, most browsers do render Times New Roman, Georgia, and Arial. Those are pretty safe. You can actually Google kind of the web-safe fonts that are pretty standard across browsers. But if you're trying to import maybe some Google font or some really funky font that the user may not have locally, it's probably a good idea, a good practice to put in some selections. Now, if you don't put in a selection, I think it defaults to Times New Roman, like just by default. But you may want to give it a little bit of a variety. Maybe you don't want it to default to Times New Roman, like worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, I want it to render in Arial font. It's not the sexiest font, but at least it's better than Times New Roman, so maybe you want to like specify the fallback. And so that's how you would do that. Really good, you guys. So hopefully that's a good demonstration. So we went in there manually just now, and we would click on a property or click onto the DOM and change something. What we're going to do the rest of the day is we're actually going to use JavaScript to accomplish that for us. And it's a much more elegant, pro way to make changes and update the DOM. And that's where we're headed this afternoon. But before we do that, we have about 10 minutes left, and then we'll take a quick break and hop into DOM manipulation. I just wanted to point out the 2 other tabs in DevTools that we're going to be spending some time. The next tab that we want to take a look at is the Network tab. And again, you don't have to memorize this stuff. Oops, that's the wrong screenshot. You don't have to memorize what these tabs do and such, and you don't have to know every single piece of functionality that these tabs give you. I just want to point out some of the cool features. So let's go back to the DevTools, and we're going to check out the Network tab. I'm going to share my screen, and let's just take a quick dive and see what we have available to us here. So you guys should see my General Assembly page. And go ahead and click on this Network section. So it's like the 4th tab over from the left. I'm going to click on that. Now, let's see this in action. So what I want you guys to do, so I have this document button selected. I want you guys first to select this All button. And we'll talk about what these different buttons do in just a second. But make sure that you have All highlighted, and go ahead and refresh your page. And so a couple of things that I want to point out here. If you look down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, see how it says 92 requests? What do you guys think 92 requests is referring to? We have 92 of what in this page? Loading.
Is there any reason why different number?
Sorry, one more time.
Is there any reason why mine would show a different number than yours?
Maybe you have something cached locally, but we should all have something like maybe 90, like 80 to 100 requests, I would imagine. But they may slightly vary from computer to computer. What that 92 requests is referring to is that there's 92 different pieces of content. There's 92 different ingredients that are baked into this page. Now, what are some of those ingredients? Well, you can see them here in the network tab. So this is kind of a captain's log, if you will, or a list of all the ingredients that this page requires. So if you scroll through here, there's a lot of images. There's going to be probably some CSS style sheets. There's going to be, an HTML page. There's going to be a lot of JavaScript. There's probably some external kind of Google Analytics scripts as well. But if you scroll through here and you really kind of break it down, you can imagine, yeah, there's probably like 92 different pieces of stuff that are baked into this page. Even these little graphics right here, right? That's going to have to be a separate request to pull in this little piggy bank graphic that I can stick into the browser, into the rendered web page, if you will. Now, what these little tabs down here do is we've got 92 requests. Let's say that I wanted to just find the HTML document for this page. What I could do is, these are filter buttons. So you can click on this documents button right here, and now you can see that it just shows you all of the documents. So it's a little bit of an easier way to view this information. And then if you click here on this general asm.ly, this is going to be the main HTML, the main scaffolding for the web page. So go ahead and click on this. So when you click on one of these files, you're going to see another window open to the right with a little bit more information. We're not going to go into down the rabbit hole of all of this stuff today, but you can see the response and request headers. So every time that your browser makes a request to CNN, to General Assembly, to Facebook, it's sending a lot of invisible meta information along with it. Things like cookies that tell the server who you are and tell the server that you have access to particular portions of a site. And we're going to go through what all this stuff means throughout the course. You can click on preview. So preview, you can see that this is actually, kind of the raw HTML scaffolding here. You can click on images, for example, and you can see all the different images. Looks like there's some ad type stuff in here as well. Let's see if we can find an image that looks familiar. Oh, so here's like even like a little subscribe banner email icon. So maybe that's somewhere on the page. Oh, it's right here. So you can see even that little icon takes a request to the web page, to the server, to get that ingredients and bake it into the web page. So as developers, we want to consider like the amount of files that we're loading, the size of those files. Yesterday, we talked about something called minification, which is when we strip out all the white space and all the extra stuff in our code, and maybe we put the code all on one line. So if we have like 92 files that we're loading, every little bit of space and efficiency helps, right? It's going to help that page load a little bit faster. Now, something else I want to point your attention to, if we go back, just go ahead and close that out. So look at this status column, and this is just something kind of for your FYI. So maybe you guys are seeing this as well, but if you click on that and you kind of sort it, you'll see, maybe these are canceled. I'm not sure why those are canceled. It's like some Google ad stuff. But for the most part, you should see the status code. We'll talk about status codes in the future. Most of these are going to be 200. So a 200 status code means that, we accessed, downloaded that content, A-OK, no problem. But if you keep scrolling down, we should see some 304 codes. So these 304 codes mean not modified. So I want to show you guys, this actually means that your browser is being really smart and efficient, and it's actually caching some of these images and some of this content that it's going to reuse. Instead of going out and downloading new images and such, it's going to use the local version of an image that it has and just bake it into the web page, which is going to make the user experience a little bit faster. And to demonstrate this, take a look in your Chrome browser, and right here at the bottom, right by kind of the number of requests, you should see something that says, kilobytes or megabytes transferred. So this is the actual amount of information, the amount of data and content that we're downloading from a particular server. Right now, this isn't that bad. I only downloaded 245 kilobytes. Maybe your version is a little different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click up here at this disable cache. And this is the same thing as if I go up to the refresh button and I click on like a hard reload. It means go out to the server and grab every single ingredient, even if I have it locally. Just get me new versions of everything and bake it back into this web page. So in order to force Chrome to do that, you can click on this disable cache button, and all of these 304 pieces of content, it's just going to go and grab a fresh copy. And I just want to demonstrate this because I want you guys to notice when I hit the refresh, this is probably going to go up into the MBs. It's going to be a lot more data that I'm having to download. So let me refresh. And so now look at how much data is transferred. So I went from like 245 kilobytes. Now I'm downloading, 1.2 megabytes of information. So this caching feature of browsers is really important. And now if I scroll down through all of these documents, probably all of these are going to have 200s because I requested every single piece of content and got a fresh copy of it. So that's just one way that your browser tries to speed up that experience and make things a little faster. Any questions about that? Just something I thought you guys may find a little interesting.
I have a question.
Sure.
How did you get to that section? I'm in network in all. I see name path on the left, and then I see headers preview response timing on the right. Sorry.
I don't know. Let's talk about that at the break. Maybe we just need to make that show up.
Click on the cross beside the header.
Yeah, you can press like a little X button that'll close that window out, and it'll like full screen this on, or like.
That worked. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Takes a village sometimes, So, something about this network tab, again, just kind of kicking the tires here. You don't really have to memorize this stuff. The network tab is not something you're necessarily going to use on a daily basis. Just showing you some interesting stuff that's going on here in the DevTools. Now, the last thing I want to show you guys, and we'll take a quick break, is just want to quickly touch on the console tab. So I think out of any of these tabs, this should be the one that you're most familiar with. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a refresh, go ahead and click on the JavaScript console tab. And you guys should be savvy at this. This is a valid JavaScript interactive environment. So we can run JavaScript in this tab here. And just to demonstrate that, I'm just going to grab this. If you look at the screenshot, I'm going to grab this little for loop just for funsies, just to demonstrate that we can run JavaScript here. So I'm going to paste that for loop in. Then we see that this for loop ran just like, if we were running this in a Replit, or if you put this in a JavaScript file and ran it locally, it's the same principle. So this is a valid JavaScript console environment. It's also really good. This is where we're going to put debugging messages. So if we want to do console logs in our code to help us pinpoint errors or to give us some information about our code, we're going to read those console logs here in the console. This is also going to be where errors will pop up as well. So this is a really powerful console. You'll hear the instructors say this frequently as we kind of get ramped up to speed. If something breaks, or if something isn't rendering, or if something isn't working right, probably the first thing we're going to say is, did you check your console? Because this is going to be the first place you want to look to see if there's some helpful messages that will help you pinpoint what's barfing on your code. This is the first place to stop. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And the reason that we did a quick overview of the DevTools is because it's really helpful to be somewhat familiar with these before we start doing DOM manipulation using JavaScript. So I just wanted to make sure that we were had a working knowledge of these three tabs. It takes a little bit of practice to get comfortable with this stuff, so you don't have to be an expert today by any means. You'll be spending a lot of time in this world, and you'll get more comfortable as we go through the course and such. So let's take a quick break. Any questions before we get up and stretch and stuff? All right, cool. We'll take a 10-minute break. Go stretch, do your thing, and we'll come back at 12:25 and we'll hop into DOM manipulation the professional way. So I'll see you guys shortly. With how to manipulate the DOM using JavaScript. This is also going to lead us into jQuery, a more condensed and fun way to do DOM manipulation, amongst other things, using JavaScript. So this is all kind of leading up to our jQuery coverage next week. Now, I want to just recap what we did this morning. I'm going to put a question into Slack. So if someone wants to come on mic and, again, just give us a little bit of a review in your own words, what is the difference between HTML and the DOM? Does someone want to come on mic and knock that out for us?
Can
All
I
right.
go?
So yeah, go ahead, Snaz.
HTML is the structure, but DOM is like finished work, the final product.
Yeah, so you could also think of, yeah, it's a really good example. You could think of the HTML as maybe even a blueprint for a building, and maybe the DOM is the, the completed, finished, built version of that blueprint or the building itself. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so HTML are the instructions, and the DOM, or the document object model, is how the browser interprets and renders a version of those instructions. Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
I reposted the markdown we're going to walk through into Slack if you want to click on that. And then let's talk a little bit about the learning objectives. So we're going to take a look at how to access elements in the DOM using vanilla JavaScript. We'll look at how to add and remove elements from the DOM using JavaScript. We'll learn how to manipulate objects and elements using JavaScript. And then we'll talk a little bit about the load order and how the browser loads files, loads the content into the browser. External style sheets, external JavaScripts, and such. So we'll talk about that as well. I'm going to put in one more visualization for the document object model as we move forward. I feel like we covered this pretty well this morning. This is just another diagram of what it looks like. So you can think of the document object model, you can think of it as a tree with branches. We're also going to refer to each of these as nodes in our document object model. But just to demonstrate kind of the hierarchy and the inheritance that exists in the document object model, how we access these different objects and elements. Here's one more view of that as maybe kind of a vertical folder structure. So maybe this is helpful just to kind of visualize it. This is a more kind of, I guess, horizontal layout. But let's say that HTML is our main parent folder. Then you have a head folder and a body folder within that folder, and then different files and folders within each of those. So it's the same principle. So maybe visually that's a little helpful to some of you. Cool. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create a very basic index.html file, and then we're going to get some practice with these DOM commands and such. So we're going to do a little bit of a udo. I would like you guys to open up your terminal and CD to your desktop. So we're just going to make one dummy file called index.html. We can just dump it on our desktop for now. So go ahead and CD to your desktop, create a new file. You can touch index.html. Open up that file in Sublime, Text, or Atom, whichever one you want to play with. And then I'm going to give you some code to paste into that file to get us started. So once you get the index.html open in Atom or Sublime Text, go ahead and paste in that HTML content into your document and save it. And then give me a thumbs up in Slack when you've copied and saved that code. And I'm going to do the same. All right, looks like everybody is rocking and rolling. That's awesome. So what I want you guys to do next is go ahead and open up that index.html in your Chrome browser. So you can right-click on the file and tell it what program you want to open it in. You can also drag that file on top of your Chrome browser. But go ahead and open that up into Chrome. And we're going to go back into the DevTools and take a look at the document object model for this page. And I will now share my screen so we can take a look at this. I'm also going to put a screenshot into Slack of kind of the gist of what you guys should be seeing. I'm going to share my screen now. I'm just going to share my entire desktop over here so we can see everything that I have open. So if you open up this pretty bare bones index.html page, and then you go to the inspect element, I'm going to go ahead and open up all of these different nodes, kind of like branches of a tree again. And it should be similar to what the screenshot that I put into Slack. So again, this is the browser's interpretation. It made a model of the document being the HTML. So let's go into our console tab next. And let's play around a little bit. We did this a little bit earlier. I'll paste this into Slack as well. Let's take a look at some of the options we have available to us in the JavaScript console. So if you go to the console tab in your DevTools, I'm going to start off, all of these are going to start typing in the word document. And you can actually hit tab to kind of auto-complete the Word document if you're super lazy like me. So I type in DOC, and then I can hit tab, and it finishes out that statement for me. So we did this earlier looking at title and last modified. But really quickly as a review, we can put in the period, which is referred to as the dot operator. And then we have all of these methods and properties available to us. So for example, you can do document.head. You can see the head section of the document. We could also do document.body if we just want to see the body section. Last modified and title we did previously. So just want to give you guys a little bit of a sample of what we have available to us. Here shortly, I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms, and I'm actually going to have you guys investigate and teach back to us some very common methods that we're going to use for DOM manipulation. And so we're going to be using these document dot methods and such to see some more functionality we can have on the DOM. Before I do that, I wanted to point out a difference between the document versus the window object. Because sometimes you'll see these in tutorials and you'll hear these a lot. So I'll open it up to the class again. Does someone want to take a stab, or does anyone know, maybe just in their own words, the difference between the document object model and the window? This is going to come into play a little bit later in the lesson when we talk about the order that things are loaded. But I just wanted to, point this out right here at the top. Does anyone want to take a stab at the difference between document versus window? Gives us argument values. The window frames what you see in the website. Yeah, that's really good. Dana, could you elaborate on that gives us argument values?
Yeah, when you kind of just click on the little arrows, all of a sudden I have web GL render buffer. The arguments are null, the color is null, the length is 0, the name is web render buffer. Then there's a prototype underneath it.
Sorry, where are you clicking on that, Dana?
In your window, console window command, just right there. Is that what we're supposed to be doing?
I don't see a window command.
WINDO, yeah.
Did you type that into the console, or are you clicking on something?
No, I typed it into the console.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Here, should I just share what I'm seeing? But
no, it's cool. So I just typed in window as well. If you guys want to do that, you can type in window into your JavaScript console in the DevTools. What I wanted to point out, kind of the main point of that question, is I want you guys to think of the document. The document is a bare bones scaffold representation of the HTML. When we refer to the window refers to everything fully rendered in the window itself. So that refers to the HTML, it refers to the CSS, the styling, any of the scripts that are run. It refers to loading any images, videos, icons. So the document is strictly the HTML code, but the window refers to that fully baked images, all that other content is what we refer to as the window. And we're going to revisit that here, a little bit later when we talk about the order that the browser reads our files. But I just wanted to put that out there, get you guys thinking about it, that there is a difference between the document and the window object. And as an example, if you want to type in window into the dev tools, in the JavaScript console of the dev tools, if you're looking at my screen, you can see that when we type in window, we get a completely different object with different properties and methods available to us. For example, we could do window.location. And here we see a little bit more of a higher level piece of information versus what we saw when we type in document. So this location refers to the location of the window itself. So it's a little bit of a bigger picture type concept. And here for the path name, because this index.html is on my desktop, you can see that the path name is users, mark right, desktop, index.html. If you went to CNN.com or ESPN and you typed in window.location, you would see the URL for that location. So you'd see ESPN.com or CNN.com. So I just want to point that out. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. We just wanted to get you guys thinking about that. And finally, before we go into breakout time, I also want you guys to consider that when we talk about the document, everything is a node. So these little branches, this little nesting that we see in our, if you go to the Elements tab, You see how all of these are, there's indentation and objects are nested within other objects. These are referred to as nodes when we talk about the document object model. So we're going to talk about something called node traversal, or traversing the DOM via the nodes. It's the same principle as like branches on a tree and stuff, but technically we want to refer to these as nodes when we talk about the document object model. Cool, so just a little bit of a primer. What I want to do now is going to put you guys into breakout rooms. We'll take maybe 15 minutes for this, but what I want you guys to do is I'm going to give each of you a couple of different concepts, a couple of different methods and properties to Google to check out. We're going to test out your Google food this morning. And what I want you guys to do is give us a quick explanation of each concept. And then if you can actually, if someone will screen share and actually show us a quick example using this really basic index.html code that we just copied and pasted. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but if you just want to do a little bit of a teach back and show us what you learned. So I'm going to paste in the assignments here into Slack. So these are the rooms. I just did these in alphabetical order. But for example, the first group, these commands, properties, and methods are associated with searching the DOM, searching the nodes. The second set deals with creation of new nodes and new elements in our DOM. The third set is regarding traversal. So if we want to find a specific element or DOM node, how can we do that? The fourth section deals with editing existing DOM nodes. And then the last one, actually the 4 and 5 are pretty similar. So editing the DOM versus editing specific nodes. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to work on this together. And I would encourage you, if there's someone in the group that maybe hasn't shared yet or hasn't gotten a lot of screen time over the past week and a half, I would encourage him or her, he or she, I don't know. I would encourage you guys to maybe be the person that gives us a quick screen share and a teach back of what you guys learned. So any questions about that? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Any questions about the next 15 or so minutes when we do the breakouts? I would encourage you to do a Google search for each of these terms, but I'll give you a little bit of a hint. All of these can be easily found on w03schools.com, a really good one-stop shopping. So if you want to just go there, that'll be cool as well. Any questions? So we'll regroup, we'll say 1 p.m., give you guys about 18 minutes. So I'll put you in the breakout rooms and just ping me if you have any questions. I'll see you guys at 1 o'clock.
Would it be okay to give a quick explanation or ask a question about node?
Sure.
Exactly what does node mean? Is it like document period, get element by ID? Is the period the node?
Well, the period is called a dot operator. The period actually gives you access to other methods and properties that you can call on the document.
Got it, got it.
A node would be, for example, let's say that, for example, the body is a node. Every element in your HTML code is going to be converted into a node.
Okay, got it. So it's the UL, the aside, the main section, body, those kind of things.
Even white space in your code, we're going to talk about that. Even if you have like an empty line of space in your code, that gets converted into a node.
Okay.
Every element, every piece of white space, everything is converted into a node. Yeah. Any other questions? That's a really good one. Faux show. All right, cool. Well, have fun, you guys. We'll see you at 1 o'clock. I'm going to open up all the rooms.
I did document.query selector, and that returns the first element you pass into the query selector from your DOM, like top down, so or shallow to deep, I guess. I'm not sure how you would describe that. But if you have, for example, your HTML and you have 5 divs, it'll return the first div.
Yeah, awesome. And what would be the method if we wanted to get all of a query selector? So query selector will get the first one. What if we wanted to get all of the query selector? If we wanted to get all the p tags, what would that do?
Get query selector all.
Yeah, perfect.
One word.
Cool. Yeah, so that query selector is a really important one because when we get to jQuery, that's really the engine that drives jQuery, is that one command, that one method right there, the query selector. That's really kind of the big engine, the big engine that's running jQuery underneath the hood. We'll talk about that next week. Awesome. So Adam or Brad?
I can go real quick. I had get elements by class name, and after figuring out what I was supposed to do, I put a couple elements with the class of blue, opened it up, and each of those elements popped up whenever I put elements by class name in parentheses blue. So basically, the explanation of that is it returns everything with the elements, every node with the class of whatever you assign it to.
Cool. Brad, would you mind sharing your sharing your screen quickly and giving us a demo? And for the other groups, if you wouldn't mind, just quickly sharing your screen, or if you don't mind putting a piece of code into Slack, just so we can run it locally and test it out. Really appreciate that.
And we get to, like for instance, I did the example. Is that it? No, where'd it go? There it is.
There you go.
All right. I mean, I already did it here. You want me to redo it? I'll just document.
You could also hit the up arrow if you wanted.
Yeah, that's the last one. Let's create. There we go.
Great.
And
so Brad, it just so happens that you have two elements in your HTML code with the class of blue.
yeah,
What data type is that returning when you run that command? What are we getting back?
the class
Yeah, so we're getting,
or string.
well, we're getting all the elements that have a class name of blue, but what data type are those elements actually contained in? So what do those square brackets tell us?
An array.
Yeah, perfect. So for any of these commands, the get elements, plural by class name, get elements by tag name, I want you guys to know that you're always going to get an array returned, an array of those elements. Now, Brad, if you only, and you could actually, if you want to do this in your code, comment out your code so you only have one tag with the class of blue. And then run that command again.
Document.
Perfect.
Or just the P class.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of point this out to you guys. So keep in mind that if you run a get elements plural by class name, tag name, etc., even if you only have one element returned, it's still going to be in an array. You're going to have an array of one object. So that's really important because sometimes when you're writing your code, sometimes the wires get crossed. But just know that even if you just have one of something, it's still going to be returned as an array of an object of one object.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Cool. Take it away, Adam.
I think you mentioned he had to split for a second.
Oh, okay.
All right. No, I was muted. Hey guys, mine was get element by ID. It functions exactly the same as class name, but instead of class name, it is ID. So you could put it in there, and it comes back as HTML. If you can see my screen, so you can see right here, I did get element by ID. Main comes back with all the HTML that's within the element that has the ID main.
Cool. And then compared to the previous command, like get elements by class name, the get element is singular. So it's literally going to return that singular object, the document object.
Because you should only have one unique value for IDs. There shouldn't be multiple like in classes.
Yeah. Very nice. Cool. Thanks for sharing. And one other quick thing to note. So when Aaron showed us the query selector, so the query selector is a little bit more flexible, but remember that you need to put either dot class name or #, the name of the ID for the query selector. Whereas here, for example, get element by ID, we don't need the #, right? We just literally put in the name of that element. Because get element by ID, JavaScript already knows this is going to be an ID that I'm looking for. Just a really subtle thing, but great, thanks. Let's move on to group 2, the creation group. So do one of you fine folks want to demo your 2 methods?
I'll go for it. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool, thanks. Okay, 1 sec. So basically, I left everything here so I could show you. First thing, basically what create element does is it allows you to create an element, like a tag, which is like a div tag, p tag, title, etc. And when you hit enter, it's just an empty tag that's created in a variable called create. That's why it says undefined. So the other thing was this, what was it? Inner HTML. Yeah, so to add to the node, you could do I did create.inner HTML. That allows me to add the text, my name is Farouk. So here, if you see on my page, I put my name is Farouk. But this is not going to show up until I append it to the body. So if you go to elements, once I appended it to the body, you can see the div that came here. So after I realized and I saw that the div was on my page, then I did this is where I did the style. To the node, I did create, call the variable name, .style.color, and set it to red.
That's awesome, man. You knocked out a couple of the groups right there. That's a really great demo. So when you use the style property to add styles to a given element using JavaScript there, how is that property attached to that element? What
the style?
Yeah, so if you go back to your elements tab, and you go down to, so just so we can make a mental note, how are those style properties attached to an element?
So the style applies CSS to it, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it applies an inline styling. So it puts that style directly on the tag. So remember that when we talk about the most specific way to add a property or styling to an element, putting it inline actually on the tag, that's going to take precedence over an external style sheet, or even if we put the style rules in the head of our HTML. The closer those rules are to a given element, they're going to take priority. So just something to keep in mind, when you use JavaScript to add style to an element, it's going to probably overwrite any other conflicting styles because it's putting it inline directly on into the DOM, like you showed us. Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool, thanks.
Cool, thanks for sharing. Traversal group.
Okay, I'll share. Let's see if it'll work, hopefully. Okay, where did Chrome go? Okay, so what Traverse basically does is kind of take the parent element, like a div, and then goes into like a paragraph element. So a way to actually see kind of what's going on in your document, kind of like an overview, just go into your code or your console here and put document.childNodes, and then you'll see every single like child node of the actual document. Then if you just hit the document.children here, you'll see basically everything from the HTML, everything in there. So all these child elements of this document. And let's see, document.lastChild, that was kind of weird because it just came up with the same thing here. But I guess that is basically the last child of the HTML doc. And then let's see, if you want to try like an actual like specific test, go into document.body child nodes, and then that'll actually bring up what's in your body.
So yeah, that's excellent, Jesse. Thank you. So we talked a little bit about this before the breakout. So notice that .child nodes is going to return those hashtag text areas. You can see on Jesse's screen. So generally those are like, sometimes those are like white space in your code. Literally, if you like have a space, in your HTML file, sometimes that text will render. It's really more of a best practice. Generally speaking, for our purposes, you probably want to go with .children, because .children is going to really give you kind of the meat of your HTML. It's not going to recognize those text nodes. So in most cases, you just want to do a .children, and that's kind of the difference. So you could do like even if you went to like CNN.com or something, and did document.body.children, and then document.body.child nodes, there's probably going to be a difference of like 100 different nodes in those two results, because it's accounting for maybe like just white space and text and stuff. Yeah, it's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Jesse. 2 more to go. DOM editing.
Is that us? Yes.
Yeah.
So I can start with appending a child. Let me share my screen here. No, Farouk already actually kind of touched on it. So appending a child, I can paste something into Slack real quick as well. What you're doing is you're specifying a parent element and then a child that you want to add after that parent element.
You're sending it to me.
So there's I just posted some,
Yeah.
Now I see what you're saying. So I just sent a private message to Zarella. Now I will share it with the rest of you. So this is the code I'll be using. So essentially what I'm going to do in our sample HTML here is I'm creating an element first. So the element I'm creating is this P. And then the append child is adding that P element to this parent element. That's my understanding. So the parent element here is the body, and I'm adding this P element to the body. So when I run this, if I go back into elements, I've done it a few times to make sure it's working, but I have an additional P here. So it's just a way to add child elements to parent elements.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When we get to jQuery, again, jQuery is built in JavaScript, and it gives us a lot of shorthand for doing a lot of the stuff that that's taking a lot of code. jQuery makes it really concise and simple. One great feature of jQuery that JavaScript, for some reason, maybe an oversight or something. So append child is going to put something at the end of that parent object, right? Prepend will put it at the beginning of that parent object, like right inside the tag. Unfortunately, vanilla JavaScript does not have like a prepend child method. I'm not really sure why. But when we get to JavaScript, it's going to be really simple. We're going to have like append and prepend. So if you want to put something at the beginning of, the beginning of the section, or like at the end of the section. So that'll be really handy for us. Cool. Sorry, go ahead. Anything else?
Oh, I was on mute.
Okay.
Tom, did you want to share remove child or Zarella?
Yeah, do you mind, one of you guys?
Tom, I didn't really understand it, but
Yeah, I can share pseudocode. I didn't actually get it to work. So here's my pin child. And let's, oh geez. This is a pin child. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this main element by ID.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that I have another ID in my document called remove me. What I can do is I could do m dot remove child remove me. And what that'll do is it'll take out the node with the ID remove me.
Okay.
And it's the theory, I guess. I haven't really gotten it to work. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. We'll take a look at a more detailed example after lunch. But yeah, so remove child just is going to remove one of the children. I think it's the first child is what it technically removes from a given parent. Yeah, but that's the spirit of it. Cool. What about what were the other two you guys had? Maybe inner text or set attribute. Do you guys have some examples for that?
We didn't really get to examples of the inner text.
Sure.
But I can explain it a little bit.
Sure. We're going to take a look at examples of most of these after lunch, so no worries. But yeah, if you want to give us kind of an explanation, that'd be great.
Yeah, so my understanding of it is inner text will take the parent, and then if you call inner text on it, it reveals basically all the children, the child elements of that parent. Am I understanding that correctly?
Inner text, usually you would use it to insert text inside the closing and opening and closing tags of an element. I think you can also use it to grab the inner text of an element. So if you use it to grab the inner text, but you don't put like an equals sign and then assign some new string to put inside it, I think that it will return the inner text of a given element. So it does both, actually. It can return the value, or you can reassign it for sure. That's how jQuery works too. And we'll take a look at an example after lunch. Yeah, and then set attribute. So you can use set attribute, any attribute that an element may have. Remember, IDs, classes are attributes. Even the style, when we put inline styling, style is an attribute. So you could use .style, or you could even use set attribute to set new style properties on an element. Cool, great. Yeah, about 5 minutes left. So group 5 with node editing. You want to share what you learned?
Our group, we didn't really realize we were supposed to do examples, so I'm actually not really sure how to do it. I just tried a little bit as everyone else is going, and I can't really get it to work. But each one just kind of like can edit the node for inner HTML. I think changes, I don't know if it changes the text or it can just change what's inside of the HTML, but node ID and class list, it can either like add or remove IDs, and I think class list just shows you the classes of HTML element.
Yeah, so if we want to retrieve a class list, or ID, if we want to add a new ID to some element or retrieve it, we could use .id as well. Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and these are just a couple of examples. We saw earlier when you do document dots, there's just a bevy of different options that you have. These are just a couple of maybe some of the common ones that you'll come across and you'll use most frequently. We'll take a look at some of these examples after lunch. And again, you certainly don't have to memorize the stuff, or that's a lot to memorize, but we just want to get comfortable with what's going on under the hood and how we can thing with JavaScript. It's super, super powerful. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper after lunch and actually implementing these onto web pages. Like I said, we have a cool Star Wars lab we'll do after lunch. And then later this afternoon before outcomes, I want to go a little bit into how do we run loops on the DOM. So right now we've just been like targeting individual classes or IDs. What if we want to add or grab elements and do something to all of them like in a for loop? And we'll take a look at, we'll see what that looks like after lunch as well. So great work on the breakouts. Hope you guys enjoyed kind of doing a little bit of a research and kind of a teach back. Any questions before we break for lunch? All right, cool. Well, you guys are dismissed. Great work this morning. We'll see you at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So have a great lunch.
Mark, you want to stop recording?